مستشار الأمن القومي الأمريكي السابق جون بولتون، أهلا بك في نيوز. في البداية، مع انسحاب الرئيس الأمريكي جو بايدن من السباق إلى البيت الأبيض، من هو برأيك الأكثر حظا، دونالد ترامب أم كامالا هاريس، ولماذا؟
Well, I think at the moment, Trump is ahead, that it's likely he would prevail over Kamala Harris. But I do think a lot of the fundamental dynamics in the race have changed because Biden's age and ability to carry out the functions of the presidency were very much a question. She's obviously much younger. She's about 20 years younger than Trump. So now the shoe is on the other foot. And I think she gives the Democratic base a lot more reason to be enthusiastic. But her problem is that the policies of the Biden administration are what primarily has been unpopular. And although I don't support Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, I think most of the party is unified and strongly behind them. So they start with a lot of preparation that she doesn't have. So I'd say at this point, you'd have to say the odds favor Trump, but it's a new race now.
سيد بولتون، كيف يختلف اليوم دونالد ترامب عن كامالا هاريس، أو ما هي نقاط الاختلاف بين المرشحين؟
Well, Kamala Harris is much more on the left side of the political spectrum. She's a California Democrat. She will stress instead her career as a prosecutor, which makes her sound like a law and order Republican. But she said a lot over the years in the Senate when she was Attorney General of California that you'll hear in Trump campaign commercials. Uh, Trump is running as Trump. You know, he has no philosophy. He doesn't articulate policy. He just has neuron flashes of things that he wants to do. His selection of J.D. Vance as vice president doesn't add anything to the ticket. He's a mini Trump in many ways. It's not a ticket balancing decision. So now I think for the next week or so, there will be a lot of attention on who Harris picks as her vice president. And if she picks the governor of one of the swing states like Pennsylvania, that could be a very savvy pick for her.
كنت ذكرت في السابق أن كلا من جو بايدن ودونالد ترامب لا يصلحان للرئاسة في الولايات المتحدة. اليوم ما هو رأيك في دونالد ترامب وكامالا هاريس؟
Well, Trump's still not fit for the presidency. I don't think Harris really has the background. She has essentially no national security experience. It's true she's been vice president for 3 years, so she sat in a lot of NSC meetings. At least she should have sat in a lot of NSC meetings. But she hasn't spoken on the subject. She hasn't shown really much interest in it. And I think that's something to be very worried about, because I think we're in a much more dangerous world, certainly in the Middle East with the war in Ukraine, with the threat posed by China. Not to have somebody who's so lacking in foreign policy experience is a real problem.
سيد بولتون، إذا ما أردنا التحدث عن الملفات الكبرى، لا سيما على سبيل المثال ملف إيران وأذرع إيران في منطقة الشرق الأوسط، برأيك كيف يمكن أو كيف يجب للرئيس القادم أن يتعامل مع هذه الملفات؟
Well, I think in the case of Iran, we still have the unfolding of the Ring of Fire strategy against Israel. The new President Pezeshkian he's not in charge. He's an administrator. He's a functionary. The supreme leader still calls the shots. And although Hamas has been really decimated by the Israelis in Gaza, they still haven't been totally destroyed. The threat from Hezbollah in the north remains. The Houthis have the Red Sea Suez Canal passage cut off, and Iran is still building up its conventional forces much closer to nuclear weapons. The Ring of Fire strategy, although it's intended to be used against Israel, can also be used against all the Gulf Arab nations too. So the threat from Iran remains unchecked, and I think they have gotten bolder over time. It's just the Israelis who are, for example, in the most recent raids against the Houthis in Yemen, they're not being patient like the Biden administration has been. They're acting in their own self-interest. So I think it's going to be a very active, very dangerous region for the foreseeable future.
سيد بولتون، هناك ملفات كثيرة تحدد خيارات الناخب الأمريكي في صناديق الاقتراع. برأيك ما هي أبرز هذه الملفات التي ستكون عاملا حاسما ومهما في اختيارات الشعب الأمريكي اليوم؟
Well, I think Ukraine is going to be an interesting test case. Trump and Vance have basically said they don't think it's an American interest to aid the Ukrainians against the unprovoked Russian aggression. The Biden administration has taken a different view, although in my opinion has not handled the conflict well. They at least understand that protecting Ukraine is an American national interest. I think the immigration question is probably the most important issue for most voters that has an international component to it. It's not something that affects most of the rest of the world, but Americans do worry about terrorists coming across the Mexican border. They worry about drug smuggling into the United States, the traditional narcotics, but now fentanyl in particular, that many believe China is essentially behind. So this question of control of the border is really a priority for many Americans, especially down in that region. And many of the other conflicts seem more remote. Even the threat of China seems more remote. And we'll see what happens in the next couple of months, because in a period of an American election campaign, our adversaries often come to the conclusion that our attention is diverted and try and take advantage of that. So depending on what happens there, that could be a significant factor when you get to September or October.
فيما يخص دونالد ترامب اليوم ونائبه فانس، ما هو رأيك في هذا الثنائي اليوم؟ وقد دعوتهما إلى إصلاح الخلل الدفاعي الذي خلفه كل من كلينتون وأوباما.
Yeah, look, I don't think Vance thinks independently. It's very interesting to watch. It's still emerging. I think Vance is a very intelligent man. He's very articulate, very presentable, but his philosophy is malleable. And he wanted to be a senator from Ohio, and he changed from being someone who was totally opposed to Trump to somebody who was a total follower. And I think that's going to happen in a number of foreign policy areas as well. So if Trump decides that he doesn't want to defend Taiwan, for example, then obviously Vance will go along. If Trump decides he doesn't want a big increase in the defense budget, Vance will go along. And it's part of the problem dealing with Trump is that he's so hard to predict because he doesn't have a philosophy. He can go one way one day and go the other way the next day.
سيد بولتون، سؤال أخير. هناك معلومات تحدثت عن محاولة إيران لاستهداف أو لاغتيال الرئيس السابق دونالد ترامب. كيف تعلق على هذه المعلومات؟ وبالطبع نحن نتحدث عن أمر مختلف عما جرى في بنسلفانيا مع الرئيس دونالد ترامب.
Well, we've known since Qasem Soleimani met his end in January of 2020 that the supreme leader was very unhappy, and they threatened a number of Americans that they saw as being involved in the decision to go after Soleimani, myself included. So Trump has always been at the top of that list. He was the president. He gave the final order. It's certainly interesting that, according to public reports, this new, pretty specific threat from Iran against Trump has come in the middle of an election campaign. Not the smartest thing that the Ayatollahs could have done. That's for sure. Whether that means there are greater risks for Trump in the next 4 months, I don't know. I haven't seen the intelligence myself. Obviously, I have an interest because they've tried to hire a hitman against me, and several of our colleagues are under the same threat. So it's a kind of interference that could get a lot of attention if there's any further evidence of Iran trying to do anything during the campaign.
مستشار الأمن القومي الأمريكي السابق جون بولتون، شكرا جزيلا لك على هذا اللقاء.